Hey, Wide Awake family. If you're not part of the family yet and love creepy stories, then hit that subscribe button and join us. Tap the bell icon so you'll never miss a story. It really helps out the channel. If you've already done all that, then smash that like button to lock it in, and please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I would love to interact with you legends. Now to the story. I thought it was just another Tinder match. Nothing special at first. We'd been messaging for a few days, nothing too deep, just the usual small talk. She wasn't weird, not overly flirty, just normal. And on dating apps, normal already feels like a win. Her name was Hannah. We'd agreed to meet up for coffee in town. I didn't think twice about it. When I got there, I spotted her right away. She was already at a table, waving as if she'd seen me across the room 100 times before. The first thing that fell off was how she greeted me. Not just a casual handshake or hey, nice to meet you, but like she was welcoming back an old boyfriend. Her smile was warm, familiar, almost relieved. Finally, she said, as I sat down, "It's been too long." I laughed awkwardly, chalking it up to nerves or maybe just her style of humor. We ordered drinks. I figured I'd settle into it. But then she asked if I'd had a long shift that day. I froze, because I hadn't told her where I worked. Not in chat, not in person. She didn't just know the type of job, either. She mentioned my exact role, down to the hours I usually worked. I forced a smile. "How'd you know that?" She tilted her head, amused. "You told me last time." I felt a small pinch in my chest, like a string being pulled. Last time. There hadn't been a last time. This was our first date. I tried to brush it off. People say things without realizing. Maybe she mixed me up with someone else. I took a sip of coffee, tried to steer the conversation back to safe ground. But then she mentioned my apartment. Not just the neighborhood. The street. The number. She described the color of the front door. The way the staircase creaked halfway up. My throat went dry. I never gave her my address. Again, I asked how she knew. And again she said, calm, casual, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Because you told me last time." The words hit harder this time. My mind scrambled for explanations. Had she been stalking me online? But my socials are locked down. My address isn't out there. Hell, even my coworkers don't know where I live. I laughed weakly, trying to hide how much it rattled me. "Maybe you're thinking of someone else." Her smile didn't falter. "Don't be silly." From there, it only got worse. She brought up my parents. By name. She asked how they were doing, if my dad's knee was still giving him trouble. She even mentioned the little town they lived in. None of that information existed online. I was careful, paranoid careful. Every detail she dropped tightened the coil in my chest. I kept asking how she knew, and every single time she gave the same answer. "Because you told me last time." Her tone never wavered. Not mocking, not playful, just calm certainty. The longer we sat there, the more she spoke like we had history together. She reminisced about trips we'd supposedly taken. Paris, a cabin by a lake, some concert in the city. She described them in detail. The weather, the clothes we wore, even the arguments we had. None of it had ever happened. But the way she told it, it felt like she believed every word. She leaned closer, her eyes never leaving mine, and whispered, "I'm glad you remembered me this time." My skin crawled. I checked my watch, made up an excuse about needing to head out soon. She didn't argue. She just nodded knowingly like she'd expected it. But before I could stand, she said something that froze me to the chair. "You'll be safe tonight. I know you hate walking home the long way, so you'll cut through 7th Street like always." That was my route. My exact route. Every turn, every shortcut I took after late shifts. My stomach dropped. I forced a shaky smile, muttered a quick goodbye, and walked out. My legs felt like lead. I made myself walk, not run. But my pulse hammered in my ears. I didn't breathe until I was blocks away. When I got home, I locked the door, shut every curtain, and sat in the dark with my phone in hand. I scrolled back through every Tinder message we'd exchanged, looking for something, anything that explained how she knew. But there was nothing. Just surface-level banter. No personal details. No way she could have known. I matched her that night, blocked her on everything. Still, I couldn't shake it. Her face kept replaying in my head, calm, certain, like she wasn't lying, like she wasn't even capable of lying about it. "Because you told me last time." I kept hearing those words over and over. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside felt like footsteps. Every car that slowed near my building made me flinch. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? This girl knows too much about me. It would sound paranoid, flimsy. Days passed. Nothing happened. No texts, no knocks on the door, no strange faces on the street. I told myself I'd been overreacting. That maybe she was some kind of obsessive internet sleuth who pieced things together. Creepy, sure, but not supernatural. Then a week later, I got a letter. No name, no return address. Inside was a single photograph. It was me and her, standing in front of my parents' house. She was holding my hand. We were smiling like a happy couple. The house looked exactly as it had last Christmas. Same wreath, same snow on the steps. But I knew for a fact that picture had never been taken. I never introduced her to my family. She never even knew where they lived. On the back of the photo, in neat handwriting, was one sentence. Next time, don't forget me. When I matched with him on Tinder, the first thing that stood out wasn't his smile or his bio. It was his dog. Almost every picture had the same golden retriever in it. There was one of them hiking on a mountain trail, another of the dogs sprawled across his lap while he grinned at the camera, even a typical man and his best friend selfie with the retriever front and center, tongue hanging out, eyes bright. His bio was short, but it mentioned the dog by name, Cooper, my wingman. It made me smile. A guy who loves his dog. That seemed safe, normal, sweet. We messaged for a few days, and every conversation somehow circled back to Cooper. He told me how loyal Cooper was, how he never went anywhere without him, how strangers always stopped to pet him. He joked that if I didn't like dogs, it would never work. I told him I loved dogs, and he lit up in a way that felt genuine. He said I had to meet Cooper. A couple days later, he invited me over. Nothing fancy, just drinks, a movie, and of course, meeting his dog. Honestly, that was what sold me. I wanted to meet the golden retriever who seemed to be the center of his world. When I got there, he opened the door with this wide, almost eager smile. He stepped aside politely, letting me in. The first thing I noticed wasn't him, though. It was the leash hanging by the door. A heavy-duty one, thick nylon with a metal clasp, the kind you'd need for a strong, energetic dog. Next to it was a hook with a collar on it. The tags clinked softly when the door shut. On the floor, pushed neatly against the wall, were two stainless steel bowls, one for food, one for water. I stepped inside, smiling, expecting Cooper to come bounding out of the living room. But the apartment was silent. No paws on the floor, no nails clicking against the hardwood, no wagging tail or excited bark. I laughed a little, breaking the quiet. Where's Cooper? Hiding from me already. He paused in the doorway behind me. Just for a second, but long enough for me to notice. And he shrugged and told me to sit down like I hadn't asked. The apartment was neat, too neat. Bare white walls, clean counters, no clutter on the coffee table. It didn't look like someone lived there, not really, except for the dog stuff. There was a toy bone under the table, a plush bed in the corner of the living room, a jar of treats on the counter, signs of a pet everywhere, but not a single sign of the actual pet. I frowned. Seriously, where is he? This time, he looked right at me. His face didn't change. His tone was flat, casual, almost offhand, like he was commenting on the weather. Oh, he said, you'll be replacing him. My stomach dropped. At first, I thought I misheard. I let out a nervous laugh, waiting for him to laugh too, to brush it off as some bad joke. But he didn't. His eyes stayed on me, steady and unblinking. His voice had no trace of humor in it. He meant it. I froze. My brain scrambled to spit it into something harmless. Maybe he meant I'd be his new companion, filling the role Cooper once had. Maybe he just worded it badly. Maybe, please, it was just an awkward joke. But the way he said it didn't feel like a joke. It felt final. My eyes flicked back to the bowls. They were spotless. Not half full, not even a trace of water. The food bowl had no crumbs, no kibble dust, like it hadn't been used in weeks. The dog bed in the corner was pristine, the fabric unwrinkled, no tufts of fur clinging to it. The toy bone under the table looked new, no teeth marks, no slobber. There was no dog. My throat tightened. I forced a smile, trying not to let him see how uneasy I was. Want to grab those drinks you mentioned? I asked, just to buy time, to keep him moving. He nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. I stood slowly, my pulse hammering in my ears, and scanned the room again. Nothing. No leash chute at the end, no hair on the couch, no paw prints by the door. Just props. A stage set for a dog that didn't exist. When he came back, he was holding 2 glasses. He handed one to me, then sank onto the couch, patting the cushion beside him. I sat down, careful not to let my knee touch his. My hands trembled as I wrapped them around the glass. He started talking about random things, his work, his hobbies, the last trip he'd taken. His voice was steady, pleasant, almost boring. Except every so often, he glanced at the leash by the door, just for a second. Then his eyes would slide back to me. I couldn't focus on his words. All I could hear was the echo of that sentence. You'll be replacing him. I needed to leave. I forced a yawn, then smiled weakly. I've got an early morning tomorrow. Should probably get going. He tilted his head, studying me for a long moment. Then slowly he smiled. Of course. He didn't stand up. He just watched as I placed the untouched drink on the table and rose to my feet. Crossing the room felt like walking a tightrope. Every step made my skin crawl, waiting for him to stop me, waiting for something to happen. When I reached the door and pulled it open, the leash swung slightly, the metal clip glinting in the light. My hand shook as I pulled the door closed behind me. The second I hit the hallway, I walked fast. Too fast. My pulse thundered in my ears. I didn't look back until I was in my car with the doors locked. He never followed. When I got home, I had matched him immediately. Blocked his number. Deleted the app for good measure. But for days afterward, I couldn't stop replaying it. The leash, the bowls, the spotless dog bed. And his voice, steady, calm, absolutely certain. You'll be replacing him. And the worst part, his Tinder profile is still active. The pictures are still there. And grinning beside that golden retriever, hiking, laughing, hugging the dog. But I don't think Cooper's been around for a very long time. Her pictures weren't over the top, just her smiling with friends, a couple of decent selfies, one shot of her hiking somewhere green and sunny. Nothing that screamed try-hard influencer or red flag party girl. Her bio was short and playful. Something about loving coffee, true crime, and bad puns. I could handle that. What made me swipe right wasn't just her looks. It was the vibe. She seemed grounded. And when we started messaging, she actually replied in full sentences, not just dry one-word answers or emojis. She asked questions back, laughed at my dumb jokes, and told some of her own. It felt easy, normal, rare. We messaged for about a week before she invited me over. She said she didn't like bars, too loud, too messy, and would rather just hang out at her place with some drinks. Honestly, it sounded better to me too. So I went. Her apartment was cozy when I walked in, small but warm. A lamp in the corner threw soft yellow light across the room. A couple of candles flickered on the coffee table, and the smell of something sweet, vanilla maybe or cinnamon, hung in the air. She smiled when she opened the door, ushered me inside, and poured me a drink before I even set my coat down. For the first hour, it felt perfect. She was funny, easy to talk to, the kind of person who made you forget to check your phone. We sat on the couch with our glasses, trading stories about college, bad jobs, and weird dates we had in the past. I remember thinking maybe this one could actually go somewhere. Then I started looking around. Her place was tidy, decorated in a way that felt lived in but deliberate. A stack of books on a side table, a plant by the window, a blanket draped over the back of the couch. My eyes wandered until they landed on the wall opposite us. That's when I noticed the pictures. Dozens of framed photos lined the wall. At first glance, they were normal snapshots. Her at the beach, her at parties, her at family gatherings, always smiling, always standing next to someone. But when I leaned forward, squinting, my stomach flipped. Every single photo had the same thing in common. The men beside her, the boyfriends, the friends, whoever they had been, had their faces cut out. Not blurred, not hidden. Literally cut out with scissors. Jagged edges where their heads had been. And in their place, taped over the holes, was my face. My profile pictures. My selfies, screenshots from Tinder, crookedly taped, sometimes far too large for the body, sometimes too small. In one, my head floated awkwardly above a broad pair of shoulders. In another, my face was barely bigger than a thumbprint, stuck over a man's jaw. But it was always me. I froze. My chest tightened as I stared. There were at least 20 frames, maybe more. Some had clearly been done in a hurry, the paper curling at the edges. Others looked like she had taken her time, aligning my face carefully, smoothing the tape flat. I felt heat crawl up my neck. This wasn't funny. This wasn't quirky. This was someone manufacturing a history with me that didn't exist. I forced myself to sip my drink, trying to act casual. My eyes darted from photo to photo while she talked, pretending not to notice how stiff I'd gone. But she noticed. Of course she noticed. When I finally glanced at her, she was smiling. Not shyly, not embarrassed. Just smiling like this was perfectly fine, like she wanted me to see. The more I scanned, the more details jumped out. A roller coaster photo, her screaming with her hands up, some guy's body next to her, my face taped where his had been. A Christmas dinner, her surrounded by family, and next to her again, my face. A beach vacation shot, her in a swimsuit, holding hands with someone whose head had been replaced by mine. I couldn't breathe. I set the glass down carefully, my fingers trembling. My heart thudded in my chest like I'd run a mile. She leaned in closer, her perfume suddenly overwhelming, and started talking softly about how glad she was we matched, how she'd been waiting for someone like me. Her tone was casual, but her eyes didn't move. They locked on mine with an intensity that made my skin crawl. I tried to think of an excuse, anything, but my brain was blank. All I could hear was the faint buzz of the lamp, the flicker of the candles, and the blood rushing in my ears. I had to get out. Finally, I managed to stammer something about an early morning, work, an excuse I knew sounded flimsy, but it was all I had. She tilted her head, studying me. For a moment, I thought she'd call me out or worse, refuse to let me go, but then she just smiled again, that same steady smile, and said she understood. She walked me to the door, still smiling, still calm. She wished me good night that we hadn't just sat in a room where my stolen face stared back at me from 24 frames. The second I stepped outside, the air felt different, lighter. I sucked in a shaky breath, my legs moving fast without me telling them to. I didn't look back, not once. I walked to my car, locked the doors, and sat there shaking until my hands were steady enough to grip the wheel. On the drive home, the images wouldn't stop flashing in my head. My face cut out and taped over strangers' bodies. My smile plastered onto lives I'd never lived. Her watching me notice, her smile when I did. That night, I had matched her, blocked her number, deleted Tinder altogether for a while. But blocking her didn't erase the memory. Because what I keep thinking about isn't just the photos I saw on the wall, it's what I didn't see. If she went that far, printing, cutting, pasting, framing, how many more were there, tucked away in drawers, in albums, in folders on her computer? And worse, were there pictures she hadn't shown me yet, pictures she was saving? Sometimes when I can't sleep, I see that smile again. The way she looked at me as my eyes darted across her wall. Not embarrassed, not ashamed. Like she thought I'd be flattered, like in her mind I'd already been there all along. When I first matched with him on Tinder, he seemed completely normal. That's what made it worse in the end. His profile wasn't flashy or suspicious, just a few casual pictures. One of him standing on a trail somewhere green and rocky, another smiling with a dog, one of those slightly awkward selfies guys always take in the driver's seat of their car. His bio was short, movies, travel, looking for someone to laugh with. That was it. Nothing over the top, nothing trying too hard. And when we started talking, it felt easy. No creepy lines, no desperate pushing to meet right away. Just steady, normal conversation. We joked about movies, swapped travel stories, and even had a running debate about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. It was the kind of low-stakes chatter that felt refreshing. After about a week, he asked if I wanted to hang out at his place for a movie night. He lived only 10 minutes away, so I figured if things felt off, I could leave. Honestly, I didn't get a bad vibe from him at all. I dealt with pushy guys, flirty weirdos, and people who gave off immediate red flags. He wasn't like that. So I said yes. His apartment was fine. Plain, almost generic. Neutral furniture, a few framed posters, a rug that looked like it was from IKEA. Nothing that screamed messy or obsessive. It smelled faintly like laundry detergent, maybe Febreze. He offered me a drink, put something light on the TV, One of those background comedies you don't really need to pay attention to. And we sat on the couch talking. And he was polite, almost surprisingly so. He listened. He asked questions. He didn't interrupt. He laughed at the right times, but not in a forced way. I remember thinking, wow, this might actually be the rare, decent Tinder date. We ordered food, ate, and the conversation kept flowing. Hours slipped by. He wasn't pushy about anything physical, didn't make any uncomfortable jokes, didn't do that thing where a guy accidentally brushes his hand against your leg. It was just normal, which is why the bathroom changed everything. I excused myself and walked down the short hallway. The bathroom was small, clean enough, with a faint lemony smell from the soap on the sink. I shut the door, sat down, and that's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was the TV, a muffled sound through the door, too soft to make out, but then it grew clearer, rhythmic, repeated. It was my name. He was whispering it. Not once, not twice, over and over in this low, steady voice. My blood ran cold. I froze, straining to listen. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe he was on the phone or repeating a line from the show. But the more I listened, the clearer it became. It wasn't a conversation. It wasn't a joke. It was him sitting in the living room, murmuring my name like a mantra. Slow, drawn out, testing the sound of it. I pressed my hands against my knees to stop them from trembling. The hairs on my arms stood straight. He whispered it again and again, sometimes with a slight inflection, sometimes dragging out the last syllable like he was savoring it. He must have said it 20 times, maybe more. Something about the sound made my stomach knot. It wasn't affectionate. It wasn't playful. It was obsessive. Possessive, like he wasn't just saying my name, he was claiming it. I didn't know what to do. If I walked out right away, he'd know I heard him. If I stayed too long, he might come looking. My mind raced, calculating escape routes, excuses. I pictured myself running barefoot down the hallway if it came to that. Finally, I decided to make noise. I flushed the toilet, turned on the faucet, washed my hands longer than necessary just to cover the sound. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it echoed in the small room. Then I took a breath, plastered a smile onto my face, and opened the door. When I walked back into the living room, he was sitting exactly where I had left him, leaning back against the couch, eyes on the TV. He looked up as if nothing had happened, smiled, and asked, "You okay?" His voice was calm, normal, smooth, like he hadn't just been whispering my name like a prayer. I forced a laugh, nodded, and sat back down. My hands shook around my glass, so I gripped it tighter. I tried to focus on the TV, about anything else, but my ears kept ringing with the memory of that whisper. And then he said my name out loud, casually in conversation. Just a normal sentence, something about whether I liked the food. But hearing it in his regular voice made my skin crawl, because layered under it, I still heard the whisper, that low, repetitive chant. I lasted maybe 10 more minutes before I made up an excuse, something about being tired, needing to get up early. I could barely keep my voice steady. He didn't argue. He just nodded and smiled like he'd expected it. He walked me to the door, thanked me for coming, told me he had a great time. His smile was wide, too wide, like he was proud, like he'd gotten exactly what he wanted from the night. The second the door closed behind me, I felt like I could breathe again. My legs carried me down the hallway too fast, almost tripping over themselves. I glanced back once, half expecting to see him at the window watching. When I got to my car, I locked the doors and sat there shaking, gripping the steering wheel. I couldn't get the sound out of my head. That whisper, steady and deliberate like he was practicing, like he was carving my name into his memory, syllable by syllable. I blocked him on Tinder as soon as I got home. Deleted our chat. Sat on my bed with the lights on, hugging my knees, just replaying it over and over. And the part that still unsettles me most. It wasn't just how many times he whispered it. It was how natural he sounded. Like he'd been practicing long before I ever got there. When I matched with her on Tinder, she came across as playful. The kind of person who was always joking, never taking anything too seriously. Her bio was clever without trying too hard. World-class overthinker, part-time comedian, full-time burrito enthusiast. Her pictures weren't over the top either, just her smiling with friends, lounging in a hammock, making a ridiculous face in one of those photo booth strips. She looked approachable, fun. Our chats reflected the same thing. She was sarcastic, quick with one-liners, the kind of person who could turn even "how's your day" into a joke. We bantered easily, traded memes, and even made fun of each other in a way that felt comfortable. I didn't think it would be serious, but maybe fun. After a week or so, she suggested drinks at her place. I make better cocktails than any bar, trust me. Plus, I hate shouting over bad music. Honestly, that sounded perfect. A night in, no pressure, no overpriced drinks, just casual. Her apartment was on the third floor of a small building. She greeted me at the door with a wide grin, pulling me in before I could even say hello. The place was small but cozy, strung with warm fairy lights across the ceiling, the glow reflecting off potted plants scattered around. It had personality, messy in a charming way. A blanket tossed over the couch, books stacked on the coffee table, a Polaroid collage on one wall. She went straight to the kitchen counter and started mixing drinks with a theatrical flair, teasing me about how bartenders water things down. "Don't worry, mine are lethal," she said, sliding me a glass with a wink. I took a sip. She wasn't lying. It was strong. We settled on the couch with music humming softly in the background. At first, everything was fine. More than fine, even. She laughed easily, leaned in close when she spoke, and genuinely seemed interested in what I was saying. It felt lighthearted like I'd expected. But then, about an hour in, something shifted. She stood up suddenly, walked over to the door, and with an exaggerated flourish, turned the lock. The click echoed louder than it should have in the quiet room. She held the key up between two fingers, wiggled it like she was showing off, and with that same grin said, "You're not going anywhere." Then she laughed. It was this bubbly, sing-song laugh, and I laughed along too, awkward, nervous, but not wanting to seem uptight. I told myself it was just a joke. A weird, slightly intense joke, but a joke all the same. She slipped the key into her pocket, and she didn't take it back out. I tried to brush it off. I kept talking, sipping my drink, pretending I wasn't bothered, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. My eyes kept darting toward the door, that locked bolt flashing in my head like a warning light. And then, every time I even shifted or glanced that way, she'd say it again. "Don't worry, you're not going anywhere." Always with that same playful smile. At first, I forced myself to chuckle, but the more she said it, the more my chest tightened. Something about the casual repetition, the way she dropped it into conversation like a running joke, made it feel less like flirting and more like a statement. She poured us more drinks, topping up my glass when I hadn't even finished the last one. "Relax," she said, tapping my arm. "You're safe here. You're not going anywhere." The words settled heavy in my stomach. I decided to test it. I stretched, stood up, and said something about how it was getting late, how I should probably head home soon. She tilted her head, smiled that wide smile, and patted the couch cushion beside her. "Sit back down," she said softly. Then she laughed again, almost sing-songy. "You're not going anywhere." The way she said it this time, her tone lower, less playful, sent a chill straight through me. I sat back down. My palms were slick against the glass I still held. My throat felt dry no matter how much I drank. She kept chatting, sipping hers, acting like nothing was wrong, while I sat there, muscles stiff, trying not to let my fear show. Minutes dragged on. Every second felt longer. She leaned back on the couch, looking perfectly at ease, perfectly content. I kept my eyes on her, then the door, then her again. My mind was racing. Could I run for it? Would she actually try to stop me? Finally, she got up, humming as she walked down the hall. The bathroom door shut with a click. My body moved before my brain could catch up. I stood, grabbed my jacket, and slipped on my shoes as quietly as I could. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it might give me away. I went straight to the door. The lock was stiff under my hand, but I twisted it hard until it gave. My relief was short-lived. She had set the chain at the top. My fingers fumbled with it, slick with sweat, but after a second that felt like forever, it slid free. I yanked the door open and stepped into the hallway. I didn't stop to listen. I didn't look back. I bolted down the stairs two at a time, shoes slapping against the concrete, lungs burning. When I burst out onto the cold night street, the air hit me like a wave. I didn't stop walking until I was blocks away. That night, I had matched her, blocked her number, deleted the chat. But the memory of her voice stayed. The way she giggled every time I shifted toward the door. The way she repeated that one line over and over until it stopped being playful. "Oh, don't worry. You're not going anywhere." And the way she pocketed that key so easily, like she'd done it before. The night started off normal. Honestly, better than I expected. I'd matched with him on Tinder about a week before, and we'd been talking pretty much every night. He was funny, not pushy, and he actually asked questions instead of spamming dry one-liners. He remembered things I told him, like how I hated mornings and loved dogs, how I'd been stressed at work lately. It wasn't groundbreaking, but compared to most guys on the app, it was refreshing. So when he suggested meeting up for drinks, I said yes. The bar was small, tucked away on a quiet street. Not crowded, just a low hum of conversation and music that didn't drown everything out. He was already there when I walked in, and my first thought was relief. He looked like his pictures. Clean cut, casual clothes, an easy smile. He stood, pulled out my chair, all that polite stuff. The first drink went down easy. We talked about travel, bad Tinder stories, favorite movies. He made me laugh. He listened. For the first hour, it felt like maybe this was going to be a good date. But then I noticed it. The first time I thought I imagined it. A soft click, barely audible like the sound a phone makes when you snap a picture with the volume low. It happened when I glanced away to look at the menu. I turned back quickly, but his phone was face down on the table, and he was sipping his drink like nothing had happened. I ignored it. A few minutes later, it happened again. Same soft click. This time when I looked over my shoulder at a group coming through the door, my stomach flipped. Again, his phone was on the table. Again, he was just smiling, talking like everything was normal. The third time, my skin crawled. It wasn't loud, but once I started noticing, it was impossible to ignore. Every single time I looked away, even just for a second, there it was. Click. When I reached for my water. Click. When I laughed at something he said and looked down at the table. Click. I tried to convince myself I was being paranoid. Maybe it was the ice settling in his glass or the sound system buzzing. But deep down I knew. I started testing it, turning my head quickly, pretending to look at the TV in the corner and snapping my gaze back to him. But he was always just sitting there, smiling eyes on me, his hands folded casually, his phone untouched. I told myself to relax. It was probably nothing. Maybe I was just nervous. We finished our drinks, and he suggested heading back to his place for another. I hesitated. Something in my gut screamed no, but against my better judgment, I nodded. I told myself I was being ridiculous, letting anxiety ruin what seemed like a perfectly good night. His apartment was close by, a short walk from the bar. From the outside, it looked like any other building. Inside, it was clean. Too clean. Bare walls, neutral furniture, barely any personal touches. No clutter, no mess, no warmth. Just sterile. He poured me a drink, and we sat on the couch. At first, I tried to sink back into conversation. I forced myself to laugh, to sip slowly, to ignore the unease twisting in my stomach. But then I heard it again. Click. When I leaned over to grab my glass. Click. When I brushed my hair back. Click. When I turned my head away even for half a second. My heart hammered against my ribs. I couldn't focus on his words anymore. I could only hear that sound. Always when I wasn't looking. Always timed perfectly. I excused myself to the bathroom just to escape. My hands were trembling as I shut the door behind me. I stared at myself in the mirror, breathing hard, whispering, "You're overreacting. You're imagining things." But the certainty in my gut wouldn't leave. When I came back out, he was in the kitchen. His phone sat on the arm of the couch, screen lit up from a notification. I don't know what made me do it. Instinct, maybe. But my body moved before my brain could catch up. I picked it up. The gallery was already open. And there I was. Dozens of pictures. From tonight. Handed shots of me at the bar. Me laughing. Me staring down at my drink. Me glancing away toward the door. Even one of me walking in. Perfectly framed, perfectly timed. Close-ups of my face, my hands, even the back of my head. My throat closed. My chest felt like it was caving in. And then I scrolled. There were more. From his apartment. Me on the couch. Me reaching for my glass. Me mid-laugh. Every moment I thought was private. Every second I wasn't watching him. Frozen. Captured. All of them taken tonight. Taken in silence. Taken without me ever noticing. I dropped the phone back on the couch like it burned me, my pulse pounding in my ears. A second later, he walked back in, carrying 2 drinks. Smiling. Calm, like nothing was wrong. I forced my face to stay neutral. I forced my voice not to shake as I said I needed to head out, that it was getting late. He didn't argue. He just smiled wider. Of course. I'll text you. He walked me to the door, polite as ever. He even opened it for me, standing back like a gentleman. The second I stepped outside, the air hit me like a punch. My legs moved fast, almost running, until I reached my car. I locked the doors the moment I got in, gripping the steering wheel with shaking hands. On the drive home, I kept seeing those images in my head. My smile, my side profile, my hands wrapped around a glass. Intimate moments I hadn't given anyone permission to keep. And the worst part wasn't what I'd seen. It was what I hadn't. Because I'll never know if those were the only ones. I thought it was just going to be a regular Tinder hangout. We'd matched a couple weeks earlier. The conversations were easy, casual, but consistent. She didn't bombard me with emojis or leave me on read for days at a time. She had this balance, engaged but not clingy, that made me think, finally, someone normal. When she suggested hanging out at her place one Friday night, it felt natural. The plan was simple: order food, watch something, just chill. Nothing out of the ordinary. When I got there, she greeted me at the door with a warm smile. She looked exactly like her photos, rare enough on its own. Dark hair pulled into a loose bun, soft features that somehow looked both inviting and mischievous. She had this calm, friendly energy that settled me right away. Her apartment was small but cozy. Fairy lights stretched across the living room wall, candles burned low on the table, and everything smelled faintly of vanilla. There was a blanket folded neatly on the couch, a couple books stacked on the coffee table. Lived in, comfortable. We sat down, ordered pizza, and talked while waiting. Honestly, it felt good, natural. We traded stories about bad Tinder experiences, laughed about awkward first dates, even debated about which show deserved a rewatch. For the first hour or so, it was perfect, exactly the kind of night I'd hoped for. Then things started to shift. I got up to grab another drink from the kitchen. When I came back, something in the room felt different. She was sitting the same way, smiling, but the vibe was off. And when she spoke, it wasn't subtle. Her entire tone had changed. Suddenly, she was talking to me like we'd been together for months. She asked if I'd remembered to bring her favorite drink, like this was something I should have known. She referenced a restaurant we'd apparently gone to together. She even brought up an argument we supposedly had weeks ago, shaking her head with this machinoid smile. At first, I laughed it off, assuming she was joking, but she didn't break. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, serious, like she fully believed it. Confused, I tried to play along, smiling and nodding, hoping I'd catch on to the joke. But before I could figure out how to respond, there was a knock at the door. She jumped up immediately and opened it without hesitation. And another woman walked in. My stomach dropped so fast it made me dizzy, because this new one looked exactly like her. Same face, same hair, same voice, same everything. It was like watching a mirror image step into the room. She smiled at me, calm and casual, and said, "Nice to finally meet you." Like this was the beginning of the night, like we were strangers meeting for the first time. I just sat there frozen, my eyes darting between the two of them. Neither acted surprised. Neither acknowledged the impossibility of what I was seeing. The first woman sat back down beside me, slipping her arm casually around my shoulders, speaking as if we'd been a couple for months. The second stood in front of me, smiling politely, asking me how long I'd been there, whether I was having a good night, the kind of small talk you'd expect on a first date. Two versions of her, two realities, and both of them acted like nothing was out of the ordinary. My brain scrambled for explanations. Identical twins. A prank? But it didn't make sense. If they were twins, why not just say so? Why play this bizarre game where one pretended we'd been together forever and the other acted like she barely knew me? The scariest part was how in sync they were. When one spoke, the other would nod or smile, as if they were feeding off each other, but their stories didn't line up. The first kept bringing up memories we'd shared, places, arguments, inside jokes that didn't exist. The second kept gushing about how excited she was to get to know me, how she couldn't wait for our first date next weekend. Neither of them broke character. Not once. At one point, they both sat down, one on each side of me. My heart was hammering so hard I thought they could hear it. The one on my left leaned in close, whispering about how much we'd grown together, her breath warm against my ear. The one on my right giggled like a teenager, brushing her hair behind her ear, asking me what kind of movies I liked. Two voices, two realities, pulling me apart. I wanted to get up and leave, but I felt trapped. Pinned between them, my muscles locked in place. When the pizza finally arrived, I thought it might break the tension, but it only made it worse. They sat across from each other at the table, both staring at me with matching faces. One asked did I remember our order, the toppings she loved. The other laughed and said she couldn't wait to try whatever I picked. It was like they were trying to convince me of two separate truths weaving between them, making me question what was real. The longer I sat there, the harder it was to think clearly. Their voices blended together, their movements mirrored each other, and I started to feel like maybe I was losing my grip. Like maybe this was normal, and I was the crazy one for questioning it. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. My chest was tight, my skin crawling. I forced a smile and said I had to head out, mumbling about an early morning. They both looked disappointed, but not surprised, almost like they'd been expecting it. The first leaned in and kissed my cheek, whispering, "I can't believe you're forgetting us." The second beamed, eyes bright, and said, "I'll text you out our first real date." Both of them smiling, both of them certain. I walked out of that apartment on legs that barely felt like mine. My hands shook as I fumbled with my keys, and when I finally sat in my car, I just stared at the steering wheel for 10 whole minutes, trying to process what had happened. Twins. That was the only explanation, but even as I told myself that, it didn't sit right. Twins didn't act like that. Twins didn't build two different versions of a relationship and trap someone between them. Twins didn't keep their stories so perfectly rehearsed, never slipping, never acknowledging the absurdity. I unmatched her that night, blocked the number, deleted our messages. But for weeks after, I couldn't stop checking Tinder, half expecting to see her again. Or both of them. And sometimes, especially when I'm alone, I wonder if they really were twins at all. Or if I just sat on that couch between two different realities and only barely managed to walk out. The date had been simple, almost ordinary. We'd matched on Tinder, talked for a couple weeks, and eventually decided to meet up in person. Dinner at a casual place, nothing fancy. He was polite, funny in that dry way that sneaks up on you, and easy to be around. When he invited me back to his place after, it didn't feel like a risk, just an extension of the evening. We had a couple drinks, talked more, and put on a movie. Nothing happened, no awkward pressure, no pushy advances. The couch was comfortable, the wine was warm in my veins, and his voice blended with the sound of the TV. At some point, without even realizing it, I must have drifted off. The next thing I remember is waking up in his bed. Light was creeping in through the blinds, soft and gray. The room smelled faintly of laundry detergent and something sweet I couldn't place. I blinked, trying to get my bearings, disoriented in that way you get when you wake up somewhere unfamiliar. The sheets were cool beside me. He wasn't there. At first, that didn't seem strange. I figured he was in the bathroom or maybe making coffee. I stretched, rubbed my eyes, and thought about just gathering my stuff and slipping out quietly. That's when I heard it. The sound of pots clinking, pans shifting movement in the kitchen. I pulled myself out of bed and padded down the hallway, still half asleep. I turned the corner ready to thank him for breakfast or at least say good morning. But it wasn't him. It was a woman. A complete stranger standing at the stove in his kitchen, flipping pancakes like she lived there. She wore a loose t-shirt, her hair tied back, moving around the counters with the casual comfort of someone who belonged. My body froze in the doorway. She turned and looked at me. No shock, no awkwardness, just calm like she'd been expecting me. "Good morning," she said, cheerful as if we knew each other. My mouth went dry. I managed to mutter a confused morning back, my voice weak, my brain scrambling for an explanation. She smiled and asked if I wanted coffee, as if this was normal, as if me standing in my date's hallway in last night's clothes, staring wide-eyed at a stranger, wasn't strange at all. Before I could respond, he walked in. He came up behind her, sliding an arm around her waist, kissing her on the cheek with easy familiarity. Then he turned to me completely casual and said, "Oh, this is my other girlfriend." Just like that. No hesitation, no shame. His tone was light, conversational, like he was introducing a roommate or a coworker. I stared at him, waiting for the laugh. The wink, some sign that this was a joke, a prank, anything. But he didn't break. He just moved to the cupboard, pulled out a mug, and poured himself coffee like this was his ordinary morning routine. The woman didn't look fazed either. She set a plate down in front of him, kissed his temple, and then turned back to me, still smiling, still calm. Pancakes, she asked, like I was a guest she was hosting. Something about their calmness made it worse. If she'd yelled at me, demanded to know who I was, I could have handled that. If he'd stammered, tried to cover, at least it would have made sense. But this complete, unsettling normalcy, it made my stomach twist. I backed up a step, muttering something about needing to leave. They didn't react with surprise or anger. They didn't protest. He just shrugged, sipping his coffee. She waved the spatula in her hand like she was saying goodbye to a neighbor. That's when I noticed the table. 3 plates. 2 already set, silverware neatly placed beside them, glasses filled with juice. And then the third, empty. Waiting. The sight of it knocked the air out of me. They hadn't just tolerated me staying the night. They prepared for me. They'd expected me to sit that table between them, like it was part of their morning ritual. The way they both looked at me confirmed it. He sipping calmly. She smiling softly. Both of them patient, both of them waiting for me to take my place at the table. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. I grabbed my bag from the chair by the door, fumbling with the strap. My voice cracked as I said I had to go. Again, no protest. No explanation. Just that same unnerving calmness. Suit yourself, he said with a shrug. Maybe next time, she added, as if I'd been the rude one for skipping breakfast. I pushed out the door and into the morning air. It hit me hard, sharp in my lungs, grounding me. I walked fast to my car, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped my keys. The whole time, I kept expecting them to follow me, to stop me, to call out with some explanation. They didn't. When I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced back once. The blinds in the kitchen window shifted just slightly, as if someone had moved them with a fingertip. Watching. I drove home in silence, my mind replaying it over and over, if a stranger cooking in the kitchen, his casual introduction, the empty plate waiting for me. It wasn't just that he had another girlfriend. People cheat all the time. People lie. That wasn't what unsettled me. It was how calm they were. How in sync. How they looked at me like I was the one out of place. Like I'd been slotted into a story they'd already written. I was the only one who hadn't memorized the script. I deleted Tinder that afternoon. Blocked his number, erased the messages. But that didn't erase the image of that table. That third plate waiting. Sometimes I still wake up early, light creeping through my blinds, and for a second, I half expect to hear pans clattering in the kitchen, to smell pancakes and vanilla, to walk in and see her at the stove, smiling at me like I belong there. And the scariest part isn't the thought of them coming after me. It's the thought that maybe in our minds I already stayed. Maybe somewhere in their version of things, I sat down at that table, ate those pancakes, and never left. I didn't think much of it at the time, just another Tinder date. We matched, chatted for a bit, and eventually agreed to grab a drink. She was fine, normal enough. Nothing about her set off alarms. She laughed at the right moments, asked the standard questions, told me a little about herself. It wasn't a disaster. But it wasn't great either. Flat, kind of forgettable. There was no spark, no moment that made me want to see her again. So afterward, I just didn't respond. No dramatic exit, no explanation. I ghosted her. It happens all the time. I figured she'd move on, swipe on someone else, and that would be the end of it. For a week it was. Then one morning, I woke up to a notification on Instagram, a message request. The account had no name, no photo, no posts, no followers, just blank. Normally, I'd ignore that sort of thing, but curiosity got me. Inside was a single image. At first, I couldn't process it. It looked like a random street photo, blurry around the edges. Then I saw the figure in the center. Me, walking to work. Same backpack slung over my shoulder, same jacket I'd thrown on that morning. The photo was recent. Too recent. My stomach dropped. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe a friend messing with me. Maybe someone I knew had made a fake account for a joke. But it didn't feel like a joke. The account was brand new. 0 followers, 0 following. No context. Just that photo. I told myself to forget about it. Weird things happen online all the time. I went about my day, pushing it to the back of my mind. But the next morning there was another message. Another photo. This time I was standing in line at the grocery store, holding a basket. The angle was from behind me, just over my shoulder. I wasn't even facing the camera. Whoever took it had been close enough to touch me. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the photo until my chest went tight. My eyes kept darting around the room as if someone might be watching even then. I tried to think of anyone who'd do this. Any friend, coworker, neighbor, anyone. But no one made sense. The only new variable in my life was her, the Tinder date. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I told myself I was being paranoid. Until the third day. Another notification. Another photo. This one was different. This one was of me sitting in my car, head down, scrolling on my phone. The angle was from across the street, like someone had been parked there or standing on the curb. I hadn't noticed anyone around when I pulled in, but clearly someone had been there camera ready. That's when the dread settled in. This wasn't random. This wasn't funny. Someone was tracking me, documenting me. That night, I barely slept. I kept getting up, pacing to the window, staring out at the street. Every shadow looked like a figure. Every set of headlights that passed made me stiffen. But the photos didn't stop. Me at the coffee shop, sipping from a paper cup. Me leaving my building, keys in hand. Me unlocking my front door. Each one snapped without me noticing, each one proof that someone was closer to me than I realized. I scrolled back through my mind, replaying that Tinder date. The questions she'd asked suddenly took on a new weight. Where do you work? What's your daily routine? What time do you usually head out? Back then, I thought she was just making conversation. Now it felt like she'd been building a map. I thought about messaging her, confronting her directly. But something stopped me. If it wasn't her, I'd look insane. And if it was her, did I really want her to know she was getting to me? So I stayed silent. The photos kept coming. No words, no captions, no emojis. Just me living my life, oblivious to the fact that someone was always there. One afternoon, I sat in my car scrolling on my phone before heading inside. Just a couple minutes, nothing out of the ordinary. At night, I got the photo. The exact moment. Me in the driver's seat, face lit by my screen. Whoever took it had been there the entire time watching. That one broke me. That one made me realize how close they could get without me ever noticing. I started changing things up. Different routes to work, leaving earlier some days, later others. I avoided the grocery store, avoided my usual coffee shop. I even parked in new spots, thinking maybe I could throw them off. But the photos kept coming. Always me, always recent, always from some hidden angle. It went on for 2 weeks, and then nothing. The account disappeared overnight. No more notifications, no more screenshots, just silence. I should have felt relief, but instead, the paranoia deepened. Why did they stop? Where did they go? Was it over, or were they just done collecting? Was I safe now, or had they simply moved closer? I deleted Tinder that same night. Deleted half my social media too. But deleting doesn't erase the memory of those photos. Months later, I still feel it. When I walk to work, I scan the corners, the windows, the parked cars. When I sit in my car, I glance up every few seconds, half expecting to catch someone in the act. Because the thing that won't leave me, the thing that keeps me awake at night, isn't the photos themselves. It's the silence in between. How close she must have been. How many times I must have walked right past her, brushed shoulders with her, sat within arm's reach without even knowing. And the worst thought of all, the one I can't shake, is that maybe she didn't stop. Maybe she just doesn't send the photos anymore. Maybe now she just keeps them for herself. And maybe right now, as I'm sitting here thinking I'm finally alone, she's still out there, watching. I matched with this guy on Tinder when I wasn't even looking for anything serious. I was just scrolling out of boredom, half watching a show on my laptop while my thumb flicked through endless profiles. He stood out because he didn't look fake or overly posed like a lot of the guys on there. Just normal photos. Him at a barbecue with friends, hiking the mountains, laughing at some dumb joke in a group shot. Nothing staged, nothing filtered to death. His bio was short and kind of funny, not trying too hard to impress. Nothing screamed red flag or creepy. When we started chatting, he came across as easygoing. He wasn't pushy. He didn't flood my inbox with corny pickup lines. He asked casual questions about my weekend, my favorite shows, my weirdest food obsession, and sprinkled in a few jokes that made me actually laugh. After a few days of talking, I actually thought he might be one of the rare, genuinely normal ones. But the more I looked at his profile, the more something started to feel off. At first, I couldn't put my finger on it. His photos were fine. His smile seemed authentic. His friends seemed normal. But then I noticed the girls in the background. He had a couple of older photos mixed in grouped shots, pictures at parties, snapshots from holidays or birthdays. They looked normal at first glance. But when I stared longer, I started to notice a pattern. Every single girl he was pictured with looked almost exactly like me. Same hair color, same build, similar style. Some of the angles were just enough to notice it. The way she stood, the shape of her jaw, the curve of her smile. I thought I was imagining it. Maybe it was just coincidence. But the longer I stared, the more my stomach twisted with unease. It wasn't one or two girls, it was all of them. Curiosity got the better of me. I clicked on a couple of tagged accounts from the photos. That's when it got worse. Each girl had an Instagram. At first, they looked normal. Tons of selfies, stories with friends, photos from concerts and vacations. But then I noticed a pattern. All of them had stopped posting at some point. Not just a pause, not just a quiet few months. They'd vanished. Their last post was always around the time they'd been photographed with him. One girl's account froze in 2019, another's in 2020, another in 2021. Every single one of them disappeared suddenly, and the tags on their photos stopped updating as well. It was like they'd been erased, not just from their own accounts, but from the social fabric of their friends' lives too. My chest tightened as I scrolled. This wasn't just some coincidence. Every girl he dated, every girl who lived like me, seemed to vanish online at the exact time they were with him. My brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe they deactivated, maybe they just wanted privacy, maybe they moved on and deleted everything. But the pattern was too precise, too consistent. The timing was just wrong. I went back to his profile and looked again at his photos, his bio, his smile. That same normal, harmless vibe that had reassured me before now felt staged, deliberate, like he had built a facade to lure people in, to hide whatever he had done to the ones before me. I wanted to unmatch immediately, but part of me needed to know more. My fingers hovered over the screen as I clicked through another girl's tagged photos from her friends' accounts. Nothing beyond the certain date. Not a post, not a story, not a comment. Every trail went cold. I felt a creeping cold dread in my stomach. I was sitting in my bedroom, dark except for the glow of my phone, and I could feel my heart pounding. I imagined what could have happened to them. Was it something sinister? Something that hadn't been caught? The thought made my hands shake. I hadn't even met him in person yet, and the weight of the possibility pressed down on me like a physical force. The more I studied the photos, the worse it felt. The girls weren't just similar, they were almost identical to the point that it felt deliberate. Someone who noticed patterns, who picked women carefully. Someone who planned. And now, if I wasn't careful, I could be next. I matched him then. Blocked him on Tinder. Blocked him on Instagram. Blocked any possible way he could contact me. But the feeling didn't leave me. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about those profiles. I kept reopening them, refreshing, hoping for a sign that maybe one of the girls had come back online, proving me wrong. None of them ever did. It was like staring into a frozen void. Every time I swiped on Tinder after that, I felt I was scanning a man's photos differently. Not just looking at him, but at the women around him, the friends in the background, the subtle signs most people wouldn't notice. Any hint of manipulation or pattern now made me suspicious. At night, I lay in bed imagining him scrolling through Tinder, swiping slowly, deliberately, looking for someone like me. It was impossible not to picture him matching with me, building trust, waiting for me to lower my guard before I disappeared just like the others. The scariest part, I fit the pattern perfectly. Same hair color, same height, same laugh, same style, and I had no way of knowing if this was just the luck of my bio and photos, or if somehow he had already started planning for me before we even matched. It was a thought that haunted me in the quiet moments, the ones where there were no notifications, no screens lighting up my face, no distractions from the outside world. I imagined all the girls before me, frozen in time on the internet, their lives suddenly cut off in some way I couldn't even comprehend. And I realized just how close I had come to being one of them. I haven't matched on Tinder since. I haven't trusted a man I didn't already know in real life. Even seeing someone with a casual group photo online makes me pause, scrutinize, analyze. The paranoia has become reflexive, unavoidable. And sometimes, in the quiet of my apartment, I catch myself imagining him out there somewhere, still swiping, still looking, still waiting. Because the thing about patterns, the next girl who fits isn't random. She's deliberate. She's chosen. And now I know that I could have been, maybe still could be, next in line. I thought it was just going to be a normal Tinder date. We matched, chatted for a few days, and decided to meet up for coffee. Nothing special. She seemed nice enough, maybe a little intense with how quickly she wanted to meet, but I figured it was better than wasting weeks texting back and forth. I told myself not to overthink it. The date itself was fine. We met at a little cafe near my place. She looked like her pictures, smiled easily, and laughed at my dumb jokes. The conversation flowed well enough, though I noticed she asked a lot of questions about me. At the time, it didn't feel creepy, just a lot of curiosity, but looking back, maybe it was more calculated than I realized. We talked for a couple of hours. She made occasional jokes, told a few stories about her family, and seemed genuinely interested. By the end, we hugged goodbye. I thought that was it. I got home, hung my jacket on the chair, and was about to order some food when my phone started buzzing. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just the usual spam notifications. Then I noticed a number of notifications. Dozens, one after another, all from Instagram. Curious, I opened the app and immediately felt my stomach drop. She had posted pictures of us. Not one or two. Dozens. Different angles, different moments, like we'd been together for weeks. Each photo was carefully framed. Some captured our conversation at the table. Some were blurry, candid shots of me looking down at my coffee or laughing at something she said. Captions were full of hearts and inside jokes that we had never shared. She had tagged me in every single post. It made my chest tighten. I didn't take any photos that day. I didn't see her take any either. Yet here I was on the screen of my own phone, documented from multiple angles in multiple moments, as if someone had been following me with a hidden camera. My fingers shook as I scrolled. There was even a photo of us hugging goodbye. The angle made it clear that whoever took it had been standing right behind us. I couldn't comprehend it. My mind raced. How could she have taken these photos without me noticing? The notifications kept rolling in. Friends of hers commented things like, "So cute together," and "Finally found the one." Strangers liked the posts. Even her family joined in, leaving little hearts and smiley faces. Everyone acted like we were an official couple, as though this date had been a turning point in a long, romantic relationship. But it had only been one date. I tried to stay calm. I messaged her, asking what was going on, trying to rationalize it. Before I could even finish typing, she sent me a message first, a link to one of the posts with the caption, "Look at us." I didn't respond. She sent another, then another rapid fire, each with photos I hadn't seen yet. My panic started to rise. And then I noticed something worse. Some of the photos weren't from the cafe. They were of me walking home, me unlocking my front door, me inside my own apartment through the window. I froze. My chest tightened, my breath caught. She hadn't just taken secret photos during our date. She had followed me home. She had watched me, unnoticed, and documented every step. I dropped my phone and sat on the floor, staring at nothing. I felt trapped, exposed, like my privacy had been stripped away in one terrifying instant. When I picked it back up, my hands were trembling. I deleted the tags, set my account to private, but the notifications didn't stop. She kept messaging me, sending long paragraphs about how perfect we looked together, how our family loved me already, how we were meant to be. Each message felt like a weight pressing down on me, dragging me into a reality I never wanted to be part of. I blocked her. Seconds later, a new account popped up. Same profile picture, same name, following me, liking all my posts again. Then another, and another. Each one reposted the same pictures, tagged me, added new captions about how in love we were. No matter what I did, I couldn't stop it. That night, I barely slept. I sat in my dark room with my phone face down on the bed, listening to the silence, dreading every vibration. I thought of the photos outside my apartment, about how close she must have been, watching me without me knowing. It was more than unsettling. It was terrifying. The next morning, I checked my phone and found dozens more messages. Screenshots of my own social media, pictures I hadn't posted in months, reposted with captions like, "Throw back with him." It was as if she was rewriting my life, twisting it into this fake narrative, one in which I had supposedly already agreed to a relationship. I deleted everything, Instagram, Tinder, any other platform I could think of. I thought maybe if I disappeared, it would stop, but the silence didn't feel safe. It felt heavy, like waiting for a storm to return. Days passed with no messages, and I began to relax slightly, telling myself it was over. Then one night, my phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. No words, just a picture. It was me taken that very day, sitting in my car outside the grocery store. The angle was from across the parking lot. My chest froze. My hands went cold. Whoever this was had been there, watching, and knew exactly what I looked like, where I went, what I did. That was the last straw. I packed a bag, stayed at a friend's place for a while, and changed my number. I didn't go home, didn't check my usual route to work, and avoided going out alone for weeks. I never saw her again. I never heard from her after that final photo. But months later, I still find myself scanning crowds, wondering if someone is following me, if someone is pointing a camera at me, if the calm, normal life I try to live is actually just a stage, secretly being documented by someone I'll never see until it's too late. Even now, I catch myself glancing over my shoulder when I'm walking down the street, checking shadows, watching reflections in store windows. The thought that someone might still be out there, silently watching, never leaves me. Because it's not just the photos that scare me, it's knowing how close she must have been. How she could blend into the background, moving with me, following my patterns, always just out of reach, but never out of sight. And that, I think, is worse than any message, any photo, any notification. When I matched with him on Tinder, he seemed normal. He wasn't pushy, didn't hit me with cheesy lines, and he actually asked questions that weren't just surface level. We talked casually for a few days before he suggested I come over to his place one night. He said he'd cook dinner, and honestly, I thought that sounded nice. I was tired of bars and loud places anyway, and the idea of a quiet night at someone's apartment seemed appealing. When I arrived, the apartment looked fine at first. Clean, not spotless, but lived in, and it smelled like food was already cooking. He greeted me warmly and gave me a quick tour of the place and poured me a drink while we waited for dinner. Everything seemed normal enough. We sat in the living room, and that's when I started noticing little things. At first, it was just a lipstick tube on the coffee table. I didn't recognize the brand, and aware of myself, so it caught my eye. I thought maybe it belonged to a sister, a cousin, or a friend. I tried not to overthink it. Then I noticed an earring on the windowsill. Just one, silver with a tiny red stone. It wasn't lying on its side or tossed casually. It was standing upright, as if it had been deliberately placed there. I felt a little uneasy, but dismissed it as a coincidence. While he checked on the food in the kitchen, I glanced around more carefully. On the shelf near the TV was a folded scarf, bright red, silky, and impossible to miss. Next to it was another lipstick, this one a darker shade, standing upright like the first. By this point, I couldn't ignore it. These weren't random objects left behind. They seemed curated, deliberately displayed. He came back into the living room and caught me looking at the shelf. I asked casually about the scarf, trying to keep my tone light. Without hesitation, he smiled and said they were souvenirs from past dates. Souvenirs. The word made my stomach drop. He said it so casually, as if it were a joke, but there was something in his eyes that didn't suggest humor. I laughed weakly, pretending not to care, but inside, I felt a chill run down my spine. Dinner was ready, and we sat at the small table by the kitchen. I barely touched my food. Every bite felt mechanical. All I could think about were the items scattered around his apartment. The lipsticks, the earring, the scarf. How many women had been here before me? And why were their belongings left out in the open, perfectly arranged, like trophies on display? The more I thought about it, the more anxious I became. None of the items looked misplaced. They weren't shoved in drawers or tossed aside. They were carefully positioned. Each piece seemed chosen to be noticed. I excused myself to use the bathroom. As soon as I walked in, my unease deepened. On the sink were 3 hair ties lined up neatly, all different colors. A compact mirror sat nearby, engraved with initials that weren't mine. None of this belonged to me. None of it looked accidental. I stood frozen for a long moment, my chest tightening, trying to force myself to breathe normally. When I came out, he was leaning casually against the wall, waiting. He smiled again, still easygoing, but now I felt like he was watching me too closely. We returned to the table, but I couldn't eat. I pushed the food around my plate, pretending I was full while my mind raced. He didn't comment on my silence. He just asked about my life, where I grew up, who I lived with, if anyone knew I was there tonight. Each question, meant to seem casual, made me increasingly uncomfortable. I decided to leave as soon as possible. I said I had an early morning and needed to go. He didn't argue. He nodded, walked me to the door, and stood there smiling as I stepped outside. The second I was out of the night air, I felt a wave of relief. My hands shook as I unlocked my car. I drove straight home, gripping the wheel tightly, my heart racing the entire way. Later that night, I couldn't stop replaying the details in my head. The lipsticks, the earring, the scarf folded perfectly on the shelf, the hair ties lined up neatly in the bathroom, and the way he casually said souvenirs like that explained everything. I felt a sick, cold knot form in my stomach. I unmatched him immediately and blocked his number. The feeling of unease lingered, though. Even when I tried to tell myself it was over, my mind kept circling back to his apartment and those items. Were those women okay? Did they leave like I did, uneasy but unharmed? Or was I the only one who walked out safely? I couldn't shake the feeling that I glimpsed something dangerous hidden beneath his calm exterior. The way he collected and displayed those items, it wasn't innocent. It wasn't quirky. It felt deliberate, methodical, and predatory. For days afterward, I checked my phone compulsively, expecting him to reach out, but there was nothing. Still, whenever I thought about meeting someone new, I imagined the small, subtle traps that might be hidden around their homes. I replayed the image of those hair ties, the compact mirror of the scarf, and I couldn't stop wondering how many women had come before me, and whether they had left as I had, or if they hadn't been so lucky. Even now, weeks later, I catch myself imagining those shelves, the coffee table, the bathroom sink, and the items placed with deliberate care. I wonder if some invisible pattern repeats in every relationship he has. And the thought that chills me most of all, was I really safe, or did I just get lucky? Because one wrong step, one misjudged moment, and maybe I wouldn't have left at all. I thought it was going to be a chill night. That's literally how she described it. We'd matched on Tinder a couple of weeks earlier, and after some back and forth, she suggested I come over to hers. She called it a quiet night in, just drinks, maybe a film. That sounded perfect. Low effort, no crowded bars, no overpriced food. Just easy. Her place was a bit outside the center of town, so I drove over after work. It was a small house on a quiet street, porch light already on. She had given me the exact address and told me to just come straight in when I arrived, which I thought was a little forward, but honestly, it didn't bother me. When I knocked, the door opened almost immediately. She was standing there, smiling casually, dressed like she'd been waiting at the door for me. I relaxed instantly, thinking maybe this was going to be a good night. She told me to come in, and I followed her down the hallway. That's when things went weird. We walked into the dining room, and I froze. Sitting at the table wasn't just her. It was her entire family. I mean parents, siblings, even what looked like grandparents. They were all neatly dressed, sitting around a huge dinner table covered in dishes of food, each plate arranged perfectly. The moment I stepped in, every pair of eyes turned toward me. They'd all smiled at once, like they had rehearsed it. Someone clapped their hands and said something welcoming, calling me by my first name. I blinked, taken aback. My date just stood beside me, still smiling like this was exactly how the night was supposed to go. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't a quiet night in. This was a full-on family dinner, and I hadn't been warned. Before I could even say anything, her dad pulled out a chair at the head of the table and gestured for me to sit. Everyone was watching, waiting. I sat down because I didn't know what else to do. The chair was positioned directly between her parents. I was a guest of honor. She sat next to me, resting her hand casually on mine like we had been together for years. The familiarity was unsettling. The conversation started immediately. They asked me questions about my job, my future plans, how serious I was about their daughter. Not small talk, heavy, pointed questions. I stumbled through answers trying to be polite, but inside I was screaming. Every time I glanced at her, she just smiled, nodding along, as if this was all completely normal. Her mother kept refilling my plate, pushing food toward me I didn't even want. Her father asked about marriage, kids, where I saw myself in 5 years. Questions that felt like traps, meant to elicit promises I had no intention of making. The strangest part was how everyone acted like they already knew me. They referred to things in my life I hadn't mentioned beyond Tinder chat. My school, my car, even my sister's name came up casually like it was already common knowledge. My stomach churned and my palms started to sweat. How could they know any of this? I couldn't focus on the food, couldn't focus on the conversation. I felt trapped at the table. Her little brother sat silently across from me, staring in a way that made my skin crawl. Her grandmother reached across to pat my hand, as though I were already part of the family. Every touch, every glance felt like a subtle assertion of ownership. At one point, her dad raised a glass and made a toast. He spoke about the future, new beginnings, and all eyes were still on me. I forced a smile and lifted my glass, but my hand shook so badly I almost dropped it. The room seemed to close in around me, every laugh and clink of silverware emphasizing how wrong this all felt. I wanted to leave so badly. I wanted to stand up and run, but the atmosphere made it impossible. Everyone was watching, silently demanding that I sit still, that I play the role they had prepared for me. This wasn't dinner. It felt like a performance. I was the only one who didn't know the lines. Finally, I said I had to leave, citing an early morning. The room went quiet for a moment. Her mother's face fell slightly, saying how sad it was I had to go so soon. Her father nodded slowly, a look of disappointment etched on his face. I felt as if I was disappointing an entire institution. She walked me to the door without saying a word. As I stepped outside, I glanced back. Her family remained seated around the table, staring at me silently, their smiles fixed, unblinking. Not one of them moved. It was like a frozen tableau designed to haunt me. She closed the door gently behind me, still smiling. I practically ran to my car, hands shaking as I unlocked it. I sat there for a long moment, trying to breathe, trying to convince myself I was imagining some of it, trying to shake off the sense of being trapped in a world I didn't belong to. I never messaged her again. The next day, she texted me with a simple "last night was nice," as if nothing had been unusual, as if a full-scale family dinner wasn't shocking enough for a first meeting. I have matched her and blocked her number. Even now, weeks later, when I think back, it isn't just the shock of me and her family that gets to me. It's how prepared they were. The table, the food, the questions, the way they seemed to know everything about me. I keep replaying it in my mind, imagining how long this dinner had been planned, how much of it had been orchestrated to see how I would react, to measure me. It didn't feel like meeting new people. It felt like stepping into a story that had already been written, and I had been cast unwillingly as the lead. Every detail, from their clothing to their questions, felt calculated. I left that night feeling like a character in someone else's life, like my own choices didn't matter. And the part that still haunts me, it's the certainty with which they all acted. Like I was already part of their world, like my refusal to participate was impossible to comprehend. I didn't just leave the house. I walked away from something much more invasive. Something that had been quietly waiting, set up to ensnare me before I even realized it. I still don't know how to explain what happened without sounding insane, but this is exactly how it went down. I matched with this guy on Tinder one night when I was bored, just lying in bed, swiping mindlessly. He wasn't the type I usually went for. He was quieter, his pictures casual, his bio short and harmless, but he seemed normal. His messages were polite, not overbearing, and he actually asked questions about me that weren't just surface level. I thought, okay, maybe this will be fine. We started chatting every day for about a week. Nothing flirty at first, just small talk, music, shows, favorite foods, the city we grew up in. He always replied quickly, almost like he was waiting for my response. I didn't mind. It seemed harmless enough. Then one night, out of nowhere, he asked if I wanted to video call. I hesitated. I don't usually FaceTime people I barely know. But he insisted, saying it would be more personal than texting and fun. I was lying in bed, scrolling on my phone anyway, and finally agreed. When the call connected, his face appeared on the screen. He looked the same as in his photos, and he smiled like he was genuinely happy to see me. I smiled back, trying to hide my nerves. The conversation started normally, light and easy. Then my eyes drifted to the background behind him. At first, I didn't register anything unusual. Plain white walls, a few posters, a bed with rumpled sheets. It looked normal. But then my stomach twisted. The poster above the bed, my poster. The exact one I had hanging on my wall. I blinked. Maybe it was just a coincidence. I kept looking. The bedding, my sheets, my blanket crumpled at the end. Every item exactly where it was in my room. I froze. My brain scrambled for explanations. Maybe it was some bizarre filter or augmented reality glitch, but that made no sense. None at all. I turned slowly in my real room to check. Lamp, check. Dresser, check. Clothes pile in the corner, check. Everything matched perfectly. Then I looked back at the screen. There it was again. The same, exact, everything. My chest tightened, my throat went dry. I couldn't speak, I just stared. He noticed my expression change and tilted his head slightly, that faint, almost satisfied smile on his face, like he knew what I had just realized. And then I saw it. The red light on my laptop webcam. I'd ignored it earlier, assuming it was normal, but now it burned into my vision. My heart pounded. Was he hacked into my camera? But the angle wasn't right. The camera on my laptop points slightly down from my desk. The angle on the screen was different. Closer, lower, more intimate. Behind him, behind me on the screen, I saw my closet door, cracked open just slightly. A dark, thin gap. I couldn't move. My body refused. My eyes stayed locked on that tiny space, while he sat there, watching me, smiling faintly. Waiting. I ended the call immediately. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone. I sat there for several minutes, staring at my room in real life, confirming every detail as if that would make it less real. But it didn't. Every poster, every blanket, every shadow the same. I wanted to run. I wanted to bolt out of my apartment into the street, screaming. But I couldn't. My mind wouldn't cooperate. My heart raced, my ears strained for any sound, but there was nothing. Just the low hum of my fan, the faint tick of the wall clock. Nothing moved. I grabbed my phone and called my best friend, barely able to speak. Come pick me up. Right now, I said. No explanations. I stood by the door, keys clutched in my hand, ready to unlock and run if anything shifted. When she pulled up outside, I ran down the stairs without even locking the door. We got to her car, and I had barely breathed until we were inside. The doors locked. I stayed at her place that night, barely sleeping, jumping at every sound. The next day, we returned to my apartment to investigate. Together, we searched every corner of the room, closets, under the bed, even vents, and the ceiling corners. We found nothing. No one, no camera, nothing out of place. My laptop showed nothing unusual either. No signs of hacking, no weird applications running. But then, near the bookshelf in the corner, I noticed it. A tiny hole drilled into the wall. Small, subtle, easily missed. Just enough for a small lens. A point of view that could see my room without being noticed. I've never seen a camera, never found one, and he never appeared on Tinder again. His profile vanished overnight like it had never existed. I moved out 2 weeks later. I couldn't stay in that apartment, in that room, in that bed. Even now, I check every background before joining a call, every shadow, every angle. I triple-check my windows, doors, closets. I know what I saw wasn't a glitch. I know he was in my room. Somehow he was there, watching. Even writing this down makes my stomach twist. The thought of him smiling, waiting for me to notice, is burned into my memory. That casual video call, the one that should have been harmless, wasn't. It was a window into something far more invasive, and it's a memory I can't shake. I should have trusted my gut that night, but instead I told myself not to overthink. I matched with this girl on Tinder, and after a few days of messaging, we agreed I'd come over to her place. She mentioned she wasn't really into bars or crowded spots, and I figured it would be more relaxed just hanging out at her apartment. I told myself it would be fine. When I first walked in, her place looked normal. A little too tidy, maybe, but I didn't think much of it. The living room smelled faintly of candles, soft music was playing in the background, and everything felt like it had been arranged deliberately to look cozy. She had drinks set out, the kind of careful little touches that made it feel welcoming. We sat on her couch, sipping slowly, talking and laughing. She was charming, effortlessly so, easy to talk to, funny, engaging. It didn't feel forced. I relaxed. But there was one thing I noticed almost immediately. She kept glancing toward the hallway. Not nervously exactly, but like she was checking on something, watching for someone or something. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was imagining it, and kept the conversation going. Eventually, things started to get a little more physical. She led me toward her bedroom. The room was small, almost bare. A bed, a dresser, and a sliding closet. Nothing unusual at first glance, nothing that triggered alarm bells. I didn't notice anything out of place as I followed her in, thinking about how smooth the night had been so far. Then I caught it out of the corner of my eye. the closet door. It wasn't fully closed, just slightly ajar, maybe an inch, just enough for a shadow to shift behind it. And through that tiny gap, I noticed a faint blink of red light. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe a reflection from some electronics, a smoke detector light, anything. But the longer I stared, the more obvious it became. It was a tiny, steady blink, precise and deliberate. A camera. My stomach dropped, my chest tightened, and I froze. I couldn't make my brain form coherent thoughts. I couldn't decide whether to confront her, run, or pretend I hadn't noticed. My mind raced. Was she recording me? Was anyone else watching? How many people had been in this exact same situation? I shifted slightly, trying to get a better view without making it obvious. The closet was dark, but the small black camera was unmistakable. Perched on a shelf, lens pointed directly at the bed. That little red light wasn't subtle anymore. It was like a tiny spotlight, highlighting the fact that I was being observed. I tried to act normal for another minute, forcing myself to laugh at her jokes and nod along. But it was impossible. My chest felt like it would explode. Every second, I expected someone to step out from the shadows or for her to suddenly reveal some twisted plan. My fight or flight instincts had kicked in fully, but I forced my body to remain seated, calm, composed. Finally, I found an excuse. "I'll get some water," I muttered, standing quickly and slipping into the hallway. My heart hammered in my chest so violently I thought it might burst. The kitchen was empty, thank God, but I still moved cautiously, every nerve on edge. I grabbed my jacket from the chair near the door, slipped my phone into my pocket, and double-checked that I had everything. When I turned back, she was there in the hallway, smiling faintly, tilting her head as if nothing were wrong. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Her tone didn't convey concern. It felt more like she had expected me to say exactly that. I nodded quickly, muttered something about needing to get home sooner than planned, and walked toward the door. She didn't stop me, didn't question me. She just watched me leave, that faint smile still there, unreadable and unnerving. The second I stepped outside, relief washed over me. I felt like I could finally breathe again, but the drive home was a torment. The red blinking light in the closet replayed in my mind over and over. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of having been trapped in some carefully orchestrated scene. Later that night, lying awake in my bed, I kept asking myself, was it just her? Or was there someone else, maybe even watching in real time from somewhere else? Did she store these recordings? Did she share them? How many other people had unknowingly sat on her bed, recorded without their consent? The questions ran in circles in my head, and the more I thought about it, the more I realized how perfect the setup had been. The apartment, too clean, the candles, the music, her effortless charm. All staged. Every detail felt rehearsed, like she had done this countless times before. Even that smile when I said I had to leave, it didn't surprise her. It was calculated, expected. I kept replaying the way she tilted her head, how calm she was, the way she never tried to stop me. It was unnerving to the point of being almost surreal. I deleted her from Tinder immediately, blocked her number, tried to erase her from my life, but the sense of violation didn't fade. Weeks later, I still caught myself imagining that small black camera, the red light blinking, storing images of me I'd never consented to share. I wondered if my face, my voice, the way I moved, all of it was on someone else's hard drive somewhere, replayed, watched, judged. And the worst part, I'll never know who was on the other side of that blinking red light. The fear of it lingers, gnawing quietly at the back of my mind, turning what should have been a simple, fun night into a memory that will haunt me forever. I thought it would just be a casual drink, nothing serious. That's how he framed it when we matched on Tinder. He seemed laid back in messages, not pushy, not creepy, just normal. Our conversations were light and easy, and I felt like meeting up wouldn't be a big deal. After a few days of messaging, he suggested I come by his place. He said he lived nearby, and honestly, I didn't feel like going to a noisy bar that night, so I agreed. I told myself it would be easier than going out, safer even, to be in a quiet apartment rather than a crowded room full of strangers. When I got there, the building looked ordinary. Just a regular apartment block, nothing fancy or particularly memorable. I buzzed, and he let me in. Taking the elevator up, I noticed the floor smelled faintly of cleaning supplies, like it had been recently scrubbed. I brushed it off as coincidence. When I reached his door, it was already open a crack, like he had been waiting for me. He greeted me with a calm, measured smile and stepped aside to let me in. At first glance, the apartment seemed fine. Spotless, actually. The floors gleamed under the soft light, no dust anywhere, nothing out of place. I thought maybe he was just meticulous, perhaps a neat freak. But the more I looked around, the more off it felt. Something about it didn't settle right in my stomach. The living room contained nothing except a single chair placed deliberately in the center of the room. No couch, no coffee table, nothing. Beside it on the floor lay a plate and a glass, perfectly arranged as if waiting for me. I laughed nervously and asked if he had just moved in. He answered simply, no, and that was it. No explanation, no small talk, just a faint smile and his eyes studying me. I began to notice more details. There were no personal touches anywhere, no photos, no books, no TV. Shelves were empty, counters bare. The fridge held nothing, not even a bottle of water, just cold metal racks shining under the dim light. I opened it slowly, hoping to see something that would make the apartment feel normal, lived in, but there was nothing. My unease grew with every step. I excused myself to the bathroom, partly to collect my thoughts, partly to snoop further. The bathroom was exactly the same as the rest of the apartment, clean to the point of sterility. No soap, no toothbrush, no toothpaste. The mirror above the sink had streaks, like someone had wiped it down obsessively just before I arrived. I opened the cabinet, empty. My reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed, pale, and uneasy. The place didn't feel like a home. It felt like a stage. I returned to the living room. He was standing near the chair, smiling faintly like he had been expecting me to notice the emptiness again. His gaze was calm, but it wasn't friendly. It was careful, deliberate, and unnervingly patient. He gestured toward the chair as if prompting me to sit. I hesitated, feeling an odd mix of curiosity and dread, and lowered myself slowly. He asked if I wanted a drink. I said, just water, please. He disappeared into the kitchen, and I immediately noticed it was empty. Or was he going to get it? A minute later, he returned holding the same glass that had been on the floor, now filled with clear liquid. He handed it to me without a word. I held it, pretending to sip, but didn't actually drink. Something about the whole gesture felt raw and rehearsed. He sat down on the bare floor across from me, still watching. The silence stretched uncomfortably, each second dragging longer than the last. I tried to fill it with small talk, questions about his job, his hobbies, anything, but he answered in brief, clipped phrases. His eyes never left mine. I felt exposed, as if he were studying me, taking in every little reaction, every slight movement. I kept scanning the apartment, hoping to find something normal, something human, but there was nothing. No photos, no trinkets, no personal effects, no sign that anyone lived here at all. The emptiness felt deliberate, like every bare surface had been cleared away to focus entirely on me. That's when it hit me. The only objects in this entire apartment were meant for me. One chair, one plate, one glass. Everything else had been removed. My unease turned into fear, subtle but insistent. I wanted to leave. I told myself I needed to head home early. He didn't react, didn't ask why, didn't even comment. He stood, walked to the door, and held it open. His calm demeanor never wavered. He didn't attempt to stop me or persuade me to stay. I left quickly, almost running, and didn't look back until I was safely inside my car, doors locked. The drive home was filled with quiet panic. I kept replaying the apartment in my mind. The spotless floors, the empty fridge, the lone chair and plate waiting for me. It felt staged, carefully curated for a single purpose, and the thought made my skin crawl. It wasn't just a weird apartment. It was an environment designed to isolate, to focus on me, and I didn't know why. I never messaged him again. I unmatched him on Tinder that same night. But the memory didn't fade. Weeks later, I still pictured him standing there, watching me calm, smiling faintly like everything had gone exactly as planned. And I still wonder. If I had stayed longer, what had he intended? What purpose had he had in mind for that apartment and that setup? The thought lingers, subtle but insistent, gnawing at the back of my mind. It's the feeling of being chosen, singled out, scrutinized in a way that I'll never fully understand. And the worst part, I'll never know what could have happened if I hadn't left when I did.
I should have trusted the weird feeling I had before I even got there, but I brushed it off. I'd been talking to this girl on Tinder for a couple of weeks, and she seemed normal enough. Not too over the top, not too quiet, just the right mix of friendly and mysterious to keep me interested. She suggested I come over to her place for dinner instead of going out, and I thought it sounded kind of nice. Home-cooked food, casual setting, less pressure. When I pulled up outside her house, it looked completely ordinary. 2 floors, white paint, little garden out front. Nothing about it screamed danger. She opened the door before I even knocked, smiling like she'd been waiting right there. I walked in, and it smelled like something was already cooking. Her place was clean, but kind of plain. Bare walls, barely any decorations, just the basics. She led me straight into the kitchen where the table was already set. 2 plates, candles, even a bottle of wine. It felt a little too prepared, but I laughed it off and sat down. She brought the food out a few minutes later. It looked fine. Just pasta with some sauce and salad on the side. I remember the first bite though. The taste was off. Not like rotten or spoiled, just strange. The texture of the meat didn't feel right. It was chewy in some parts, mushy in others. The sauce was thick and metallic, like it had too much iron in it. I tried not to make a face. I forced myself to keep eating while she watched me closely, way too closely. She didn't eat much herself. She just picked at the salad and kept smiling, asking me if I liked it. I kept saying yeah. It was good, even though my stomach was already uneasy. That's when I noticed the counter behind her. At first, I thought it was a normal knife block, but when I looked harder, it wasn't knives at all. It was metal instruments laid out neatly on a cloth. Long, thin blades, scissors, clamps, things I'd only ever seen in hospital shows. Not kitchen knives, surgical tools. I froze for a second, fork halfway to my mouth. She followed my eyes and then quickly stood up, blocking my view with her body. She said she needed to grab something from the cupboard, but the way she moved felt deliberate, like she was covering them on purpose. My brain started racing. Why would anyone have that in their kitchen? Why weren't there normal knives, just those? I tried to act normal, but every bite of the pasta made me feel worse. It wasn't just the taste now, it was the thought of what I might actually be eating. She kept asking if I wanted more, pushing the plate closer every time I slowed down. I said I was full, but she insisted. Her eyes didn't leave me, not once. The whole time I felt trapped in that chair, pretending I was fine. I glanced around the room, looking for something normal, anything. But the more I looked, the stranger things felt. The fridge had no magnets, no food lists, no clutter. The cupboards I could see were completely bare, like they'd been emptied out. The only food in sight was what she'd put in front of me. My stomach twisted, and I excused myself to use the bathroom just to get away from the table. She pointed me down the hall, and when I got in there, I locked the door and just stood staring at myself in the mirror, trying to calm down. I debated texting a friend, but my phone battery was nearly dead, and I didn't want to risk making noise if she heard me. When I came back out, she was standing at the end of the hall, smiling again like nothing was weird. But when I sat back at the table, the instruments on the counter were gone. Completely gone, like they'd never been there. That made it even worse. She'd hidden them while I was away. I picked at the pasta a little more, forcing down tiny bites just so I didn't draw attention. She talked casually, asking about my family, my childhood, my favorite foods. And that last part made my skin crawl, because she leaned forward and said, "I made this one special for you." I wanted to leave so badly, but I didn't want to make it obvious. I said something about having to get up early for work the next morning. She nodded, still smiling, and started clearing the plates. She told me to wait by the door while she packed up leftovers for me. I stood there in the hallway, heart pounding, staring at the closed kitchen door. I could hear her moving around, clinking dishes, and then silence. I couldn't take it anymore. I opened the door just a crack to peek inside. She was standing at the counter with her back to me. The instruments were back out, lined up neatly again, only now they were wet, glistening under the light. She was holding one of the longer blades in her hand, turning it slowly like she was examining it. I didn't wait to see more. I stepped back, grabbed my jacket, and quietly opened the front door. She didn't call out, didn't follow me, didn't say anything. I walked fast to my car, got in, and drove without looking back. The whole drive home, my stomach hurt, not just from the food, but from the thought of what it might have been. I never texted her again, never unmatched her, never blocked her. I just deleted Tinder completely. But even now, every time I sit down to eat pasta, I get that taste back in my mouth. That strange metallic flavor, the chewy meat. And I can't stop picturing her in that kitchen, standing over those tools, waiting for the next person to say yes to dinner. I use Tinder like most people do, half out of boredom, half hoping maybe something decent would come out of it. That's how I matched with him. His pictures looked normal. Not overly posed, not edited to death, just standard shots. Him at a park, him holding a coffee, him in a hoodie at what looked like a house party. His bio was short and casual, and when we started messaging, he came across as easygoing. We talked for a few days before he asked if I wanted to grab food. I said yes. Then he offered to pick me up. Normally, I'd say no to that, but he was charming enough in the messages that I let myself think it was fine. He asked for my address, and without really hesitating, I gave it. That's something I still regret. The night he came, his car pulled up outside, and he texted me that he was there. I walked out, and when I got in, he smiled and said hello in the exact way I expected. No warning signs. The car was clean, music was low, and he smelled like aftershave. Everything about him seemed put together. At first, it felt normal. We talked as he drove, and he was actually funny. He asked me about work, about the places I liked to go, about food I enjoyed. He made eye contact at stoplights, gave off this vibe like he was really paying attention. For the first 15 minutes, I thought maybe this was going to be one of those rare decent dates. Then the car ride started to feel longer than it should have. I knew the area pretty well, and the restaurant we'd agreed on was about 20 minutes away. At one point, I realized we should have taken a left, but he went straight instead. I asked where we were heading, and he brushed it off, saying he knew a better way. I tried to believe him, but my stomach tightened. A few minutes later, I heard the click. The sound of the doors locking. I froze. He didn't even look at me when he did it. He just kept driving, eyes forward, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I looked out the window and realized I didn't recognize the road anymore. It wasn't city streets. The houses were spread out. Streetlights got rarer, and soon it was just long stretches of dark road with trees on both sides. The kind of place you wouldn't walk through alone. I kept telling myself to stay calm, but every little detail stood out. His hands gripping the wheel tighter. The way he stopped asking me questions. The silence in the car except for the hum of the engine. I thought about trying the handle, but when I pulled on it, it didn't budge. He noticed, glanced at me, and smirked before looking back at the road. That smirk made my stomach turn. We drove like that for what felt like forever. I kept trying to track turns in my head, but I lost count. It was just winding roads, trees, and the occasional maillocks. No other cars. No sign of a restaurant. At one point, he slowed down near a dirt road that led into the woods. My heart dropped. He paused like he was considering turning down it, then kept going straight. I don't know if he was messing with me or deciding something in his head. Finally, I pulled my phone out quietly, trying to type a message to my friend. But before I could hit send, he noticed. He glanced at my hands, then reached over and grabbed my phone, tossing it into the back seat like it was nothing. He said something about wanting my full attention, but the way he said it wasn't playful. It was flat. I sat there, staring at the dashboard, trying to think. My brain was racing. No phone. Locked doors. Middle of nowhere. Just him and me. Then, out of nowhere, headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. Another car behind us. He noticed too, because he started driving faster. My pulse went through the roof. I didn't know who was behind us, but it felt like my only chance. I shifted in my seat, made it look like I was adjusting, and my hand slid to the lock. I pressed it fast, and I heard the click as it unlocked. He immediately slammed it back down, glaring at me, and for the first time that night, he didn't look calm. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp. That's when he made a mistake. He was so focused on me that he didn't notice a stop sign ahead. He braked hard, and in that split second, the car behind us pulled up close. I didn't think. I just yanked the handle with everything I had, shoved the door open, and threw myself out onto the pavement. I hit the ground hard, scraped my knee, but I didn't care. I got up and ran straight toward the headlights of the other car, waving my arms like a maniac. The car slowed, and I heard the driver shout something, but I didn't even look back at him. When I finally did turn, his car was already gone. He'd taken off, leaving me on the side of the road with strangers. The people in the other car let me use their phone, and I called a friend to come get me. I didn't tell them everything. I just said my date got weird, and I didn't feel safe. They gave me a ride to a nearby gas station, and I waited there until my friend picked me up. I never saw him again. His Tinder disappeared the next day, either unmatched or deleted. His number stopped working. It was like he vanished overnight. I still think about that moment when he locked the doors. The sound of it. The way the roads grew darker the farther we went. The smirk when I tried to get out. It plays back in my head like a loop. Every time I get in a car with someone now, even friends, I glance at the locks without even meaning to. That's the part that stuck with me, the sound of the click and the realization I wasn't in control anymore. I matched with this girl on Tinder, and at first, it felt pretty normal. She was attractive. Her photos weren't overly filtered, and there was this goofy energy in her bio that made her seem approachable and fun. I'd had enough weird encounters on that app to know not to get my hopes up, but when we messaged, she actually replied in full sentences. It wasn't the usual one-word responses or dry small talk that I had come to expect. When she walked in, it was her. Exactly like her photos. Same smile, same hair, the same clothes I'd seen her wear in one of her pictures. I remember thinking, finally, someone who isn't pretending to be something they're not. She waved at me, sat down, and the conversation just clicked. It was easy, natural. The first date went well. We talked for hours, ordered some food, and had a couple of drinks. She told me about her part-time job, her love for cooking, and how she recently started trying to learn guitar. Nothing about her raised any red flags. I even walked her to her car afterward, and we hugged before going our separate ways. That felt like a safe, normal ending to a first date. I thought that would be the end of it for that night. But then, about a week later, she texted me. She said she wanted to meet again, but this time she wanted me to come over to her place. I hesitated for a moment. It felt fast, maybe even a little strange, but curiosity won out, and I agreed to go. Her flat was small but tidy, nothing remarkable. When I arrived, she greeted me warmly and led me inside. She made some food while I tried not to be too formal, and we settled on the couch with something on Netflix. It felt like a completely normal second date. We joked, laughed, and the evening passed without awkwardness. I felt a growing sense of ease, thinking maybe this one could actually go somewhere. Then, about halfway through the night, there was a knock on the door. She looked surprised, but not panicked, just slightly caught off guard. She got up and answered. That's when another woman walked in. She introduced the woman as her sister. That's when my world tilted sideways. The woman looked exactly like the girl I'd been with. Same face, same hair, even the same voice. I froze. It wasn't like seeing identical twins. It was like seeing the exact same person duplicated in the room. The two of them talked casually, laughing and joking, like nothing about this situation was out of the ordinary. The sister sat down on the other end of the couch and began asking me questions. Questions that the girl I'd been dating had already asked. Questions about my work, my time on Tinder, whether I was seeing anyone. I tried to keep calm, to pretend I wasn't noticing the impossibility in front of me, but my skin crawled. The girl I'd been dating didn't acknowledge anything unusual. She kept smiling, playing along as if this sister was a separate person entirely. At one point, she went to the kitchen to grab drinks, leaving me with the sister, who stared at me like I had just wandered into the wrong house. I felt trapped, caught between disbelief and the creeping terror that this wasn't normal. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were identical twins, I thought. That would make sense, logically, but nothing added up. Same hairstyle, same clothes, even the same tiny scratch on their wrists. Not just similar, exactly the same. I couldn't reconcile what I was seeing with anything I knew about reality. The night continued in this blur. They switched off talking to me. Sometimes one would leave the room, and the other would pick up the conversation seamlessly, pretending not to know what had just been said. At one point, I excused myself to go to the bathroom, just to breathe. When I returned, only one of them was on the couch. I asked where the other had gone, and the one sitting there looked at me blankly and said, "Who?" I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to cause a scene or make a spectacle in a stranger's home. I made up an excuse about having work early the next morning, and that I needed to leave. They, or she, or both of them, I still don't know, smiled and walked me to the door as if nothing had been unusual at all. Walking down the street afterward, my mind raced. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't hallucinating. I know what I saw. Two of them, in the same flat, same everything. The experience haunted me. Every detail kept playing on repeat. The mirrored movements, the exactness of their appearances, the way they had interacted as if the other didn't exist. I never messaged her again. A few days later, she texted me like nothing had happened, asking when we could meet up again. I left the message on read. Then another text came, this time mentioning her sister wanting to see me too. That was the last straw. I blocked her on everything: Tinder, phone, social media. Months have passed, but the memory doesn't fade. Every time I scroll past someone on Tinder who even vaguely resembles her, my stomach tightens. I keep replaying the night, questioning my own senses. Was it two people, or was it one person pretending to be two? And if it was one, what kind of person goes to that extreme? I still don't know what to make of it. The event is lodged in my memory like a warning sign I can't forget. It wasn't just weird, it was deeply, fundamentally wrong. And the worst part, I still don't know if I ever truly saw the truth that night, or if I never will. I still don't really know how to process what happened, but I'll try to write it out the way it happened to me. Maybe it'll make more sense on paper. I matched with this guy on Tinder a few months ago. He looked normal enough, nothing flashy, just a few decent photos and a short bio that mentioned he liked films and running. I wasn't overly interested, but he messaged me first, and he seemed funny. His sense of humor was dry but clever, not the usual cheesy pickup lines. I figured, why not? We started talking casually for a week. Nothing serious, just easygoing conversation. He asked the usual questions: where I was from, what I liked to eat, what I did for fun. I answered politely, and he did the same. Nothing felt off at first. He suggested we meet up for coffee, and I agreed, thinking it would be a harmless, casual date. When I'd arrived at the cafe, he was already there. He stood up when he saw me, smiled, and waved me over like we'd known each other forever. That little detail struck me as slightly odd. Most people just nod or smile, but I brushed it off as him being friendly. We sat down, ordered drinks, and began talking. At first, everything was fine. We joked about movies, music, and the general awkwardness of online dating. But then he started bringing up details about me that I was sure I had never shared. He mentioned my favorite food. Not in general terms, like Italian food or pizza, but the exact brand and topping combination I used to order at a restaurant when I was a kid. I laughed nervously, thinking maybe I had mentioned it and forgotten. But I knew I hadn't. Then he mentioned my childhood dog, by name. A name that wasn't common at all. He said it casually, like it was obvious I had told him. My stomach dropped. I knew I hadn't said anything about it. I asked him how he knew, and he just grinned. "You told me, remember?" he said, and shrugged as if that settled it. I didn't argue, but the unease settled into the pit of my stomach. Something wasn't right. As the date went on, the details kept coming. He knew the name of my first boyfriend. He knew the street I grew up on. He knew the name of my primary school. My mind raced. I don't post any of this on Tinder. My Instagram is private. My Facebook has been locked down for years. I kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe he had guessed some things, maybe some coincidence. But deep down I knew. There was no way. When I left the cafe, I felt sick. He hugged me goodbye like everything was normal, and I went straight home. I spent the night scrolling through my social media, trying to figure out how he knew all of it. That's when it hit me. I had noticed before that I'd get random follows on Instagram from accounts with no profile picture, no posts, and bizarre usernames. I always blocked them, assuming they were bots or people trying to sell something. But now, looking closer, I realized there were dozens of them. All different accounts, all following me at some point. I had brushed them off before, but now I wasn't so sure. The next day, I dug deeper. I searched his number online. There wasn't much to find, but I stumbled upon one of the old Instagram accounts I had blocked months ago. The more I looked, the more I noticed the overlap. Certain accounts had followed me for years. They would like posts within minutes of me putting them up, even when I barely had any followers. Even when my profile was practically invisible, these random accounts were always there. And then it hit me fully. It was him. It had always been him. He had been following me for years through fake profiles, watching silently, collecting details, piecing together my life from photos, captions, comments, and stories. He probably knew more about me than I knew about myself. I went cold. Every post I had ever uploaded, every story, every dumb caption, it wasn't just my friends seeing it. It was him, watching, silently tracking everything. The date wasn't a casual first meeting. It wasn't about getting to know each other. It was him, stepping into a carefully constructed scene where he already knew everything about me. That's why it felt so off, so invasive, like he had been inside my head. I unmatched him on Tinder immediately. I blocked his number. I locked down every account, deleted old photos, and even made a new email. But even weeks later, I can't shake the unease. Sometimes I catch myself checking Instagram, and a new account with no posts and no profile picture will view my story within seconds. Maybe it's random. Maybe it's him again. The thing that unsettles me the most is how casual he seemed about it. Like it was normal to know all of that about someone without their knowledge. Like it wasn't a boundary violation, like it wasn't a little horrifying. His smile, the way he shrugged, the ease with which he mentioned things he should never have known, it sticks with me. I stopped using Tinder entirely. I barely post on social media now. Every notification makes me hesitate. Every new follower feels like it could be him again, lurking behind a mask. And the worst part, I don't know if he's still out there. I don't know if he's making another account right now, waiting, watching, knowing more about me than I do. The thought alone eats at me every day. I try to remind myself that I am careful, that I've done everything to protect my privacy. But nothing erases that feeling of being watched, of someone having known me longer than I knew myself. I can't help replaying that date, over and over, and imagining all the things he could have collected, all the ways he could be lurking. It's not just a story about a bad date anymore. It's a reminder that people can be incredibly invasive, patient, and silent. That someone can build an entire history with you without your knowledge, and step into your life pretending it's casual, normal, harmless. And it terrifies me more than I can explain.